What if I told you that the key to unlimited wealth has been hiding in plain sight for over 3,000 years? That billionaires, business moguls, and financial titans have been using this ancient strategy without even realizing it. Florence Scovel discovered something that changed everything about money, success, and abundance. And it's been sitting right there in one of the most famous passages ever written. You see, most people think Psalm 23 is just about comfort and peace, but Florence uncovered the shocking truth. It's actually the most powerful financial blueprint ever created. While millions of Americans are drowning in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and stressing about their financial future, there's a select group who've cracked this code. They sleep peacefully while their bank accounts grow. They give generously while their wealth multiplies. They rest easy while others hustle themselves to exhaustion. The difference? They understand what Florence Scovel taught, that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, isn't just a prayer, it's a financial promise. Tonight, I'm going to reveal the 5 hidden wealth principles buried in this ancient text that could transform your financial life forever. Are you ready to discover the secret that's been hiding in plain sight? The source versus the channel. Here's where most Americans get it completely wrong about money, and it's costing them everything. We've been programmed to believe that our boss, our job, our clients, even the government are our sources of income. But Florence Scovel discovered the truth that separates the wealthy from the worried. These are just channels, not sources. And the moment you confuse your channel with your source, you open yourself up to a lifetime of financial anxiety. Think about it. How many times have you heard someone say, I lost my job, now I don't know how I'll survive? Or, my biggest client dropped me, I'm ruined. That's channel dependency, and it's the #1 wealth killer in America today. The ultra-wealthy think differently. They understand what Florence taught. God is the source. Everything else is just delivery methods. When you truly grasp this, everything changes. You stop panicking when the stock market crashes. You don't break into a cold sweat when your boss calls you into the office. You sleep peacefully while others scroll through job boards at 2 a.m. But here's what's really mind-blowing. When you align with the true source, the channels start multiplying. It's like switching from a single water faucet to having streams flowing from every direction. Money starts showing up from places you never expected. Old debts get forgiven. Opportunities fall into your lap. Ideas that generate income start downloading into your mind like you're plugged into some cosmic business network. I know this sounds too good to be true, but Florence proved it works. She watched people go from bankruptcy to abundance simply by shifting their understanding of where wealth actually comes from. They stopped chasing money and started following divine guidance. They stopped working harder and started working smarter. They stopped stressing about provision and started expecting it. The Bible talks about God providing manna in the wilderness, food falling from the sky when there was no economy, no trade routes, no Walmart. He used ravens to feed Elijah during a famine. He multiplied a widow's last meal to sustain her household for months. None of these miracles relied on normal financial systems because God doesn't play by economic rules. When you make this shift, you stop being a slave to circumstances. The recession doesn't scare you because your source doesn't recede. Inflation doesn't worry you because your provider doesn't fluctuate. Job market instability doesn't shake you because your security isn't tied to human systems. But here's the part that blew Florence's mind. This principle doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. When you're not desperate, you make better decisions. When you're not anxious, you see opportunities others miss. When you're not controlled by fear, you take calculated risks that lead to massive rewards. The wealthy already know this. Even if they don't use spiritual language, they diversify their income streams. They build systems that work without them. They invest in assets, not just trading time for money. They understand that true wealth comes from tapping into something bigger than themselves, whether they call it market forces, economic trends, or divine providence. Florence discovered that when you acknowledge God as your source, you're not just changing your mindset, you're accessing a supply chain that never breaks down. While others fight over scraps in a competitive marketplace, you're dining at a table that never runs empty. This isn't about sitting back and waiting for money to fall from heaven. It's about working with divine intelligence instead of against it. It's about making moves based on inner guidance rather than outer pressure. It's about building wealth that lasts because it's built on an eternal foundation. The most successful entrepreneurs will tell you they had to trust something beyond themselves to make their biggest breakthroughs. They'll talk about gut feelings, intuitive hunches, or being in the flow. Florence just gave it the right name, divine guidance from the ultimate source. When you get this first principle right, everything else becomes easier. Your anxiety decreases, your confidence increases, and your bank account starts reflecting your new understanding. You stop living like an orphan fighting for survival and start living like a child of the King, expecting to be provided for. Green pastures, the abundance mindset. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Florence Scovel realized this wasn't just pretty poetry. This was God's GPS coordinates for supernatural abundance. Here's what most people miss. Sheep won't lie down unless 3 conditions are met. They need to feel safe, well-fed, and free from fear. When the Bible says God makes you lie down in green pastures, it's describing a state of complete financial security. You're not just surviving, you're thriving so abundantly that you can actually rest. Most Americans live in financial stress mode 24/7. They're always on edge, always worried about the next bill, always calculating if they have enough. But Florence discovered that when you follow divine guidance, you're led to green pastures, places of overflowing provision where anxiety is replaced by peace. The key word here is makes. God doesn't suggest you find abundance. He leads you directly to it. Think about this. The shepherd knows where the grass is greenest, where the water is purest, where the grazing is best. He's done the scouting. He's mapped out the territory. Your job isn't to stress about finding provision. It's to follow his leading. This completely revolutionizes how you approach financial opportunities. Instead of frantically chasing every get-rich-quick scheme or desperately networking your way into every room, you learn to discern divine direction. You start asking different questions. Is this where the shepherd is leading me? Instead of, how much money can I make? Florence watched people transform their financial lives by applying this principle. They stopped forcing doors that wouldn't open and started walking through doors that swung wide with ease. They stopped competing for scraps and started operating in abundance. They discovered that when God leads you to green pastures, there's always more than enough. But here's what's revolutionary about green pastures. They're sustainable. Grass grows back, water keeps flowing. It's not a one-time windfall that disappears. It's a renewable resource system. When you align with divine guidance, you're not just getting a financial blessing. You're being positioned in a place where blessing naturally occurs. This is why some people seem to have the Midas touch. Everything they invest in grows. Every business they start succeeds. Every opportunity they pursue pays off. It's not luck. They've learned to follow the shepherd to green pastures instead of wandering in financial deserts trying to make things happen through willpower alone. The green pastures principle also eliminates comparison and competition. When you're in your designated pasture, you don't need to look over the fence at what others have. Your portion is specifically prepared for you. Your abundance is tailor-made for your purpose. Your green pasture might look different from someone else's, but it will be exactly what you need when you need it. Florence noticed that people who grasped this principle stopped living in scarcity mode. They stopped hoarding money out of fear and started stewarding it with confidence. They understood that if God led them to one green pasture, He could lead them to another. If one source of income dried up, another would appear. This creates what psychologists call abundance mindset. But Florence understood it was more than positive thinking. It was aligning with the nature of God Himself. God doesn't operate in scarcity. He doesn't ration blessings. He doesn't run out of resources. When you're connected to His guidance system, you start operating the same way. The practical application is profound. You stop making financial decisions from desperation. You don't grab the first opportunity that comes along because you're afraid it might be your only chance. You have the luxury of wisdom because you trust that if you miss one green pasture, the shepherd knows where others are located. This principle also brings timing into the equation. Grass isn't always green. Pastures go through seasons. But when God leads you to a green pasture, it means the timing is perfect. The opportunity is ripe. The conditions are favorable. You're not trying to force growth in winter. You're harvesting in the appointed season. Florence saw that when people truly believed in green pastures, their whole approach to money changed. They started thinking long-term instead of just getting through the month. They began building wealth instead of just paying bills. They shifted from survival mode to abundance mode, and their bank accounts started reflecting their new mindset. Still waters, the peace that multiplies wealth. He leads me beside still waters. And this might be the most overlooked wealth secret in human history. Florence Scovel discovered something that Wall Street doesn't want you to know. The most profitable financial decisions are made in stillness, not stress. While everyone else is panicking about market volatility, the truly wealthy are operating from a place of inner calm that actually attracts money. Here's the thing about sheep. They won't drink from rushing, turbulent water. They need still, peaceful conditions to hydrate properly. The same principle applies to your financial life. You can't receive clear guidance, make wise investments, or recognize divine opportunities when your mind is churning with anxiety and fear. Most Americans make their worst financial decisions when they're emotionally charged. They panic sell during market dips. They make desperate career moves when stressed. They say yes to bad deals because they're operating from fear instead of faith. But Florence revealed that stillness is actually a financial strategy, and it works better than any trading algorithm ever created. When God leads you beside still waters, He's not just providing rest, He's positioning you for strategic thinking. In stillness, you hear the whispers that others miss. You notice opportunities that stressed minds overlook. You receive creative solutions that anxious thoughts can't access. This is why meditation and prayer aren't just spiritual practices. They're wealth-building activities. When you quiet your mind, you tune into divine frequency. Ideas start flowing. Strategies become clear. The next right step reveals itself. You stop reacting to financial circumstances and start responding with supernatural wisdom. Florence watched millionaires who understood this principle. They didn't make major financial moves when agitated. They created space for stillness before big decisions. They knew that peace wasn't the absence of opportunity. It was the presence of divine guidance. And divine guidance always leads to divine results. But here's what's counterintuitive. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means moving from rest instead of stress. When you're beside still waters, you're not paralyzed. You're powered by peace. You take action, but it's inspired action rather than desperate action. You work, but you work from overflow rather than deficit. The still waters principle also protects your wealth. When you're not operating from emotional turbulence, you don't fall for scams. You don't get swept away by get-rich-quick schemes. You don't make impulsive purchases that drain your resources. Stillness creates a filter that protects you from financial predators and poor decisions. Think about the wealthiest people you know. They move with calm confidence. They don't seem frazzled or desperate. They speak slowly and deliberately about money. They exude peace even when discussing million-dollar deals. That's not because they have no problems. It's because they've learned to operate from stillness regardless of circumstances. Florence discovered that stillness also accelerates wealth building. When you're not wasting energy on worry, that energy gets redirected toward productivity. When you're not scattered by anxiety, your focus becomes laser sharp. When you're not depleted by stress, you have more capacity for income-generating activities. The still waters principle transforms your relationship with money completely. Instead of chasing financial success, you attract it. Instead of forcing outcomes, you allow divine flow. Instead of manipulating circumstances, you cooperate with cosmic principles. Money starts coming to you in ways that feel natural and sustainable. This is why tithing and giving work so powerfully for those who understand still waters. When you give from peace rather than pressure, when you sow from stillness rather than stress, you're operating in the same frequency as divine abundance. Like attracts like. Peaceful giving generates peaceful receiving. Florence noticed that people who mastered this principle stopped being reactive to economic news. They didn't get shaken by stock market crashes or excited by boom cycles. They understood that their financial security wasn't tied to external turbulence. It was rooted in internal stillness. They had found the eye of the storm and learned to live there permanently. The practical application is transformative. Before making any significant financial decision, you create space for stillness. You pray, meditate, or simply sit quietly until peace settles in your spirit. You don't move until you feel the calm guidance of the shepherd. And when you do move, you move with supernatural confidence because you know you're flowing with divine current rather than fighting against. Its still waters don't guarantee that storms won't come, but they guarantee that when storms do come, you won't be shaken by them. Your financial foundation remains solid because it's built on the rock of divine peace, not the sand of human emotion. The valley of financial breakthrough. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Florence Scovel realized this wasn't about physical death. This was about walking through financial death and coming out alive on the other side. Every wealthy person has a valley story. Every millionaire has faced a moment when everything looked hopeless. Every successful entrepreneur has walked through the shadow of financial death, bankruptcy, business failure, devastating loss. But here's what separates those who emerge victorious from those who stay defeated. They understand the valley is not a destination, it's a transition. The key word Florence emphasized is through. You're not camping in the valley. You're not building a house in the valley. You're passing through the valley. This changes everything about how you handle financial hardship. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, what is this preparing me for? Most Americans fear financial valleys so much that they make terrible decisions to avoid them. They stay in toxic jobs because the paycheck feels safe. They avoid entrepreneurial risks because failure seems scary. They settle for financial mediocrity because it feels more secure than financial adventure. But Florence discovered that valleys are actually wealth accelerators for those who know how to walk through them correctly. Here's what happens in the financial valley that doesn't happen anywhere else. You discover what you're really made of. You learn to trust God when you can't see the outcome. You develop spiritual muscles that can only be built under pressure. You acquire wisdom that only comes through tested faith. These aren't just character qualities, they're wealth-building assets. The valley strips away everything false and reveals what's eternal. It shows you the difference between your source and your channels. It teaches you that your security isn't in your bank account. It's in your relationship with the shepherd. And once you learn this lesson, no economic downturn can ever shake you again. Florence watched people who understood valley dynamics. When they lost their jobs, they didn't panic. They pivoted. When their businesses failed, they didn't quit. They learned and launched again. When their investments crashed, they didn't despair. They prepared for the comeback. They knew that valleys are temporary, but the lessons learned, they are permanent. The valley also accelerates your promotion. Think about every success story you've ever heard. The breakthrough came after the breakdown. The victory followed the valley. The promotion came after the pressure. God doesn't waste your pain. He transforms it into your platform. Your greatest mess becomes your greatest message. Your deepest valley becomes your highest mountain. But here's the secret Florence discovered. You don't walk through the valley alone. You are with me. The shepherd doesn't abandon you in hard times. In fact, he draws closer. This is when you experience God's provision in ways you never knew were possible. Unexpected money appears. Doors open that shouldn't open. People help you who have no logical reason to help. Grace shows up in ways that can't be explained. The valley teaches you to fear no financial evil. When you've walked through bankruptcy and survived, you'll never fear market crashes again. When you've lost everything and watched God restore it, you'll never be intimidated by economic uncertainty. When you've been down to your last dollar and seen supernatural provision appear, you'll never doubt God's ability to provide again. Florence noticed that people who embraced their valleys instead of resenting them always came out stronger, wiser, and wealthier. They learned to give when it didn't make sense. They discovered how to sow in famine and reap in harvest. They developed an unshakable faith that attracted unshakable wealth. The valley also connects you with your true calling. Sometimes God allows financial pressure to push you out of comfortable situations that were limiting your potential. That job you lost might have been blocking your entrepreneurial breakthrough. That business that failed might have been preparing you for a bigger vision. That investment that went bad might have been protecting you from an even bigger loss down the road. Most importantly, the valley teaches you to walk, not run. In crisis, most people make hasty decisions that compound their problems. But when you trust the shepherd's pace, you learn to take one step at a time. You focus on today's provision instead of tomorrow's problems. You handle what's in your hand instead of worrying about what's beyond your reach. The valley is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's not your punishment. It's your preparation. And when you walk through it with the shepherd, you don't just survive. You thrive. You emerge not just with restored finances, but with supernatural wisdom that guarantees you'll never be the same again. The table of public vindication. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Florence Scovel called this the ultimate financial comeback verse. And once you understand what it really means, you'll never doubt God's ability to vindicate you again. This isn't just about having enough food to eat. This is about God setting up a public display of His favor on your life, while the very people who counted you out are forced to watch. It's about experiencing such undeniable breakthrough that even your haters have to acknowledge that God is on your side. Think about every person who ever doubted you, dismissed you, or declared you would never amount to anything. Every boss who passed you over for promotion. Every investor who rejected your business plan. Every family member who said you'd never succeed. Every friend who laughed at your dreams. God remembers every slight, every dismissal, every moment when you were underestimated. And He's preparing a table, not in private, but in their presence. Florence discovered that this table represents complete financial restoration and vindication. It's not just about getting back what you lost. It's about getting back more than you lost, with interest, with acceleration, with supernatural multiplication. And it happens publicly so that everyone who witnessed your valley can witness your victory. The table is prepared, not thrown together. God doesn't just give you a quick blessing and call it good. He orchestrates a feast. He arranges abundance with precision and care. While you were walking through your valley, while people were writing you off, while circumstances looked impossible, God was behind the scenes, preparing something that would silence every critic and answer every prayer. But here's what blew Florence's mind about this principle. Your enemies don't get to partake. They get to watch, but they don't get to participate. The blessing is for you. The vindication is for you. The abundance is for you. They may have caused your pain, but they won't share in your gain. God has a way of making sure that those who try to block your blessing end up becoming witnesses to your breakthrough. This changes how you respond to opposition. When people come against your financial progress, when they try to sabotage your success, when they spread lies about your character or competence, you don't retaliate. You don't defend yourself. You don't waste energy fighting back. You simply say, God is preparing a table, you'll see. Then you focus on following the shepherd while he handles your vindication. Florence watched this principle play out in countless lives. The employee who was wrongfully terminated ended up starting a company that outperformed their former employer. The entrepreneur whose business partner betrayed them launched an even more successful venture. The investor who was cheated by a corrupt advisor developed their own investment firm. In every case, the table was bigger than the trial. The victory was greater than the valley. The comeback was more spectacular than the setback. The table principle also reveals God's timing. He doesn't vindicate you prematurely. He waits until the table is fully prepared, until the blessing is complete, until the moment will have maximum impact. When God moves on your behalf, it's not just about blessing you. It's about demonstrating His faithfulness to everyone who's watching. This is why patient endurance is so crucial to building wealth. When you trust God's timing for vindication, you don't make desperate moves to defend your reputation. You don't compromise your integrity to speed up your breakthrough. You don't take shortcuts that could undermine your ultimate victory. You wait for the table to be prepared, knowing that God's vindication is always worth the wait. The table also represents relationship restoration. Sometimes the enemies who watch your comeback become the allies who support your purpose. When they see God's undeniable favor on your life, their opposition melts away. Your success becomes a testimony that transforms hearts and opens doors for kingdom impact. Florence emphasized that the table isn't about pride or revenge. It's about proof. Proof that God keeps His promises. Proof that He rewards faithfulness. Proof that He never abandons those who trust Him. Your vindication becomes someone else's inspiration. Your comeback becomes their hope. Your table becomes their invitation to trust God with their own dreams. When you truly believe that God is preparing a table for you, it changes everything. You stop trying to convince people of your worth because you know God will demonstrate it. You stop defending your vision because you know God will defend it. You stop worrying about timing because you know God's timing is perfect. You simply keep following the shepherd, keep trusting the process, and keep believing that your table is being prepared. And when it's ready, everyone who needs to see it will be watching.